As winter draws to a close, we're now only weeks away from spring, and one of the things that happens at this time of year is we start to see an emergence of particularly broadleaf weeds, things like fleabane, dandelions, also clovers and bindi. Today we're going to look at controlling those in a couple of different ways. It's kind of interesting really, because as I look around here, there's a significantly lower population of weeds on the tiff-tuff than what there is over on the Santa Ana. Now, the reason why that is, tiff-tuff being, I guess, a much newer developed couch grass, has been bred to be more tight, more dense, and obviously more drought tolerant than, say, the Santa Ana. Santa Ana tends to be a little bit more upright, a little bit more open, where this is definitely more a tighter, denser mat, and that helps to crowd out competing weeds, especially at this time of year. So let's have a look around the tiff-tuff here first. We'll go through and do a little bit of an ident of some weeds that I've got here. We'll have a look at some of the weeds on the other side as well, and we'll talk about the chemicals we need to control them. Okay, the first one I've got for you might confuse a couple of people. Now, if you look at that, you'll probably go, well, that's a clover. And that's actually a really good guess. This one, in fact, is not a clover. This one is actually a medic, and this is probably what they call burr medic. And the reason I know that this is a burr medic is when we look particularly, well, two things that stick straight out. Number one, this will just come up from one actual taproot, whereas a clover or a white clover doesn't perform in such a way. It comes up in a big clump, and it's a little bit harder to remove. This one, when we look at the back side of the leaf, the second leaf, so the middle leaf, is actually on its own little stem. That's a telltale sign. I'm just going to try my hardest to get it there for you. This one's a really small example, but it's on its own little stem, and that tells me straight away that this is a medic, not a clover. But again, our clover and broadleaf killers will control that one. So that one there is a burr medic, yellow flower generally, as opposed to generally a white flower on our white clovers. So as it would grow and enlarge, it can still cover a large area, but it comes back to one point where the clover comes back to, you know, a lot happening under the surface. Another one that might catch you out, and you might just call it bindi, is in fact bachelor's button. And it's actually not a bindi at all. It looks a bit like it, but again, when we come down close to it and we have a look, we see these little button-like flowers that it's got. Now, I hope it's really coming through on camera. It's got leaves similar to a bindi, but these little things here are not the spikes, okay? So this is, again, it's only a very small example, and it's probably not a bad problem to have is when you've only got tiny, tiny weed infestation, but that one there looks a bit like bindi. It's got a little flower on it like that, and they call it bachelor's button. Okay, so we've looked at bachelor's button. Let's have a look at the real deal. This is a young bindi plant here. It's just starting to get moving, and this is now the ideal time to control him because he hasn't yet formed his little spiky crown. So you can see, again, I hope it comes through clearly. You can see the carrot leaf like leaves on it. So if you've ever grown carrots, similar sort of a lacy, parsley style leaf, but as I said, at this stage he hasn't developed his little crown of prickles. Perfect time to treat him. Now, if you only had one or two weeds, I really do believe the best way to treat this stuff is mechanically. Simply little garden fork or one of those more upright, non-bend over style weeding sticks that a lot of people are using these days. But on larger infestations, it's more efficient to actually chemically control. But one or two infestations, I definitely believe, just weed it out by hand. Over here on the Santa Ana, things are looking a little less rosy. In fact, I hope that comes through on camera. I'm going this way because I can see them really clearly as I look, but I just hope you can see big infestation, quite a decent infestation across this whole area, and they're just sort of shining out very, very unattractively so. So this is definitely going to be a situation where we need some chemical control. Righto, so the next one we've got here is known as cat's ear. Now, cat's ear is very, very similar to dandelion. So the main difference with this one is the leaf looks very similar, except dandelion is cut in further to the main stem. This one here comes up with multiple flowers. Dandelion generally comes up with one flower and turns into that puffball thing that that the kids blow around. All these weeds that we've talked about here now will be controlled with the products like bow and arrow, dicamba, which is generally sold as Camber M or something along those lines. I'm going to use a different product today and use a product called Casper, which is from Syngenta. And it is actually better. It's a dual action product. It'll actually be better for my fleabane because it is actually quite difficult to kill because it's such a deep taproot on it. So I need a dual action product to get the best results. So that's why I'm going to use that one. It's worth noting that product is not suitable for use on buffalo turf. If you have a buffalo lawn, you're probably best to stick into a buffalo specific selective herbicide. In other words, a herbicide that will control your weeds but not damage your buffalo turf. So Bow and Arrow is one, Buffalo Pro by Yates is one. Products like dicamba and Casper in my case are not going to be suitable for a buffalo lawn, but will be fine for kikuyu and couch grass and zoysia and all those sorts of things. It's just the buffalo can be a little bit tricky with a lot of products. Okay, so this one here will need no introduction at all. This one here is our good old winter grass or Poa annua. Now, unfortunately, the broadleaf herbicides and the bindi killers are not going to touch this. This is known as, I guess, a grassy weed. There are specific products that you can buy that will control this weed. Off the top of my head, there is, I think it's David Gray's winter grass killer is one, but if you do have an issue with ongoing winter grass, I really suggest you start thinking about some pre-emergent control. So things like, as I mentioned earlier, things like barricade, things like embargo, etc. That's the most effective way to control all weeds. However, if you are considering doing things like ryegrass oversows or doing any sort of turfing, or the grass is too new or too young, so less than 3 to 6 months old, probably more 6 months old, I wouldn't recommend putting down those sorts of products because they will affect the way the new lawn establishes. The roots of your lawn need to be lower than the barrier that those products leave on the soil surface so that they can continue to establish and help your new lawn to develop. So new lawns avoid the pre-emergence. Going forward, I would recommend pre-emergence unless you're going to do oversows and things along those lines. So as I mentioned, the product I'm going to apply today is a product called Casper. Now it's manufactured by Syngenta and it is a dual action product. So it contains dicamba. It also contains, I should say, prosulfuron. Now the prosulfuron will actually target my fleabane a little bit better than the dicamba will. That's why I'm going for this one today. Now, like all products like this that are designed to actually come into contact with the leaf, I am going to use a surfactant. So don't confuse surfactants with soil wetters. They are different things. And I do recommend, if possible, always using a flat fan nozzle. It gives you the most accurate and precise amount. If you are on a bit of a budget or you only happen to have one of these more traditional, what I call cone or adjustable style spray lances that sort of can be a fan or quite a jet, so this is just water obviously, use that, but they're not as precise, so you need to be more careful about applying them. Products like this are quite fine for spraying rose bushes or hedges or something like that, but when you're doing large open areas, you really can't go past something with a flat fan nozzle, and basically that is just a very thin, wide strip. So as you walk, that thin, wide strip gives an even coverage all the way along. We'll mix this up to now. Once again, the usual safety stuff does apply. Now, always read the label before you use these things. Some of these products will say don't mow 3 days before or 3 days after, etc., etc. This one doesn't actually say that, but I still haven't mown. I still prefer to leave my weeds with plenty of leaf on them so they can absorb more chemical. Now, other things to keep in mind when you are actually applying any sort of herbicide, make sure that the weeds are actively growing. So in other words, they're not stressed out from drought or excessive rain or frost even. It's sort of that happy medium like it is with a lot of things. So that's going to ensure you get the best results. Obviously, if the wind is above 20 kilometers an hour, again, we don't spray. As also, if the wind is beneath 3 kilometers an hour, we need just a slight tiny bit of breeze, not too much that it blows it all over the neighborhood or all over the next door neighbor or whatever the case may be. but not so little that it just sits across the top of the surface in what's called an inversion layer, where the chemical doesn't actually hit the ground, it just stays above the surface and can actually move in a breeze. So we don't want that either. So 3 to 20 k's an hour, we tick all those boxes today. I'm gonna get some protective gear on, I'm gonna mix this stuff up, and we'll get it onto the lawn. Products such as Casper, dicamba, bow and arrow, all these broadleaf, bindi style killing products, you should generally start to see it reacting with the weeds within an hour or two of application. In fact, I can already start to see some of these weeds now start to stand up, and that means they're starting to absorb the chemical, and the chemical's starting to have an effect on the plant. Now, the kill can vary, the full kill can vary. Some products may need an application 2 weeks apart. This one here is good for about 4 to 6 weeks. So it does last a bit longer because we've got that second ingredient, which is more longer lasting than just the dicamba on its own. I can start to see it there, and I reckon by this afternoon, it'll be a heap more noticeable again. Anyway guys, look, we'll wrap the video up here. I'm really starting to hope that I can get some more regular videos coming out again now, especially now that the weather's starting to fine up. We're also starting to get a little bit more stuff happening in the yard. I'm actually about to start some projects at Mum and Dad's, including some turfing, some irrigation, so plenty to come. I've just got to try and slot it all into schedule. If you're new here and you've enjoyed the content today, please like and subscribe, share it with your mates, it helps the channel grow. Have a fantastic weekend everybody. We'll catch you next time on the Aussie Lawn.